Hello and welcome back to the returning viewers, and a warm welcome to any new viewers. This Friday installment is about me sharing aspects of my life story to provide a little bit of light relief and entertainment value, hopefully, and allow me to document what my life progress has been over the years. I am Tanya, I'm 52 years old, I live on the east coast of Scotland, but my background is multicultural. My father is of Greek descent and my mother is half Polish and half Scottish. Now, I was born in the UK, and after spending 5 years here, we went and moved over to Greece for 12 years. And then after that 12-year period, we returned back to the UK, where I've remained since then. Hence the Scottish accent rather than any Greek noticeable accent there. Now, what I've been doing on these, because this is the new format where on a Friday it's about storytelling, but what I've done this week is, as part of my self-reflection on the Monday and then on Wednesday, the tools and techniques, where I've mentioned a bit the inner child work that I've been doing and a little bit about codependency. We were sort of starting to relay the story of me being over in Greece, but I thought I would try and tie it into that kind of people pleasing and over-giving behaviours and patterns that I developed from a fairly early age. But it was probably more pronounced for me reflecting back on the age of 5 when we moved over to Greece. And as part of wanting to belong, because one of our innate human needs, especially as young children, is we want to feel love, we want to feel safe, and we want to feel that we belong and we're connected to people. And having moved from Scotland over to a small village in the north mainland in Greece, where I didn't speak the language to start with, my innate desire to feel that connectedness and that belonging was extremely high in my kind of needs that I had at that time. I felt safe because it was a very safe environment, and I also felt loved because my grandmother and my aunt, who had never seen me for years, for 4.5 years, they were very loud and vocal and very affectionate and sort of hugging you and kissing you. So even though from a kind of caregiver, my parents may have not always necessarily been as affectionate, I certainly felt that affection from my caretakers in the village. But that sense of wanting to belong and connect was very pronounced, and that is the reason why within a month of me actually being in the village, I was actually able to converse and speak English and Greek and be able to translate between the two languages for the kind of vocabulary that I had at the age of 5. And that kind of sense of wanting to fit in and belong was a really strong desire within me. So any opportunity that sort of came about where it gave you the opportunity to connect, especially with kind of older kind of people in the village in terms of age group, so kind of teenagers and then adults, you were doing everything in your power to actually demonstrate that you were good-humoured and you were up for a bit of a laugh, and you were willing to sort of, it was almost like a truth or dare, but without the truth. It was almost more the kind of dare activities. So at that age of 5, I had never seen a horse, I had never seen a donkey, and this is where back then tractors weren't a big thing, because we are talking late 70s. So donkeys and horses were a big thing. Now, obviously, for those of you that are familiar, a donkey is a much smaller in stature size, where a horse can actually be fairly large. So for a 5-year-old, sitting on a horse had both that kind of, oh wow, I'm so high up, and at the same time it had that kind of sense of fear, because it was like it was a long way down if you were to fall. And it wasn't that there had saddles and you had reins or all the proper equipment, so you were barebacked on a horse. To which I was actually, to start with, I was excited, but then I actually got scared. And then the teenage kids around me started laughing and making jokes, not really fully understanding everything that they were actually saying, because Greek was a fairly new language to me. Straight away, that kind of sense of, oh, they're laughing at me, not with me, created this desire in me, oh, I must be doing something wrong. I'm not behaving the way that they expect me to behave, so therefore I need to do something to improve. So as a result, to try and conquer my fear of being on a horse, I asked to go on a donkey, and that sort of gave me a bit more kind of safety and security because I wasn't as far from the ground, but still, it was still a long way down. But it took away that bit of fear of being up on a horse, and as a result I felt a wee bit braver, until the donkey decided that it wanted to go and eat from a branch of a tree that was down a ditch. So therefore, what the donkey did, as naturally trying to adjust itself, it threw me off balance and I fell off the donkey. Now, the plus side was, because it wasn't a long way down, I didn't actually hurt myself, but that also threw the alarm bells for the teenage people around me that, oh, wait a minute, maybe if she was on the horse and that had happened, that could have been really dangerous. So they didn't put me on a donkey or a horse for a wee while after that event, but that sort of started generating within me that desire, oh, I want to people please, I want to be of value to people, and I want to do what people are asking me to do, without questioning at that age whether what they were asking me to do was safe, whether it was the right thing to do. But it was just creating that kind of innate desire to people please. And one of the things that had happened a few months after that donkey incident was in Greece, if you are familiar, a lot of people smoke cigarettes, and a lot of them are chain smokers. And back in the 70s, it was really prevalent. And considering that in our village, tobacco was one of the crops that farmers were farming, so they were planting and actually sort of then drying out in order for them to sell it to the tobacco companies. So it was almost like, oh, this is our bread and butter, that this is what we're producing and then we're selling, so therefore we'll also be consumers of it. So they were, a lot of the kind of teenagers were actually smoking, and they were smoking in open. It wasn't a case of that there was a parental kind of that they weren't allowed to smoke. It just seemed a wee bit freer, and most people did that. But they thought it would be a bit of a fun joke to sort of like get Tanya, 5-year-old Tanya, take a drag from a cigarette. Now, naturally, trying to imitate what adults are actually doing, you try and mimic what they're doing. So you see them inhale, you try and inhale. Your little lungs are not able to sort of like manage the smoke, and even adult lungs can't manage the smoke, and most people will end up coughing and sort of like rejecting the smoke. And that's what I did, which then resulted in more laughter from the teenage kids around me. As a result, then this was my kind of second, oh, wait a minute. They laughed at me when I was on the horse, they laughed at me when I fell off the donkey, but because that happened at the same time, I just sort of associated it, that was one experience. And now this is another time where they're laughing at me. But this time, Tanya was trying to be resourceful, and it was like, well, I'm going to show them. I'm going to learn and practice how to smoke, so then the next time they offer me a cigarette, I'm not choking. Now, both my parents were smokers, and so was my father's brother, who was also sort of like staying sporadically in the house. So there was always an abundance of cigarettes available. And because of the weather, there would be occasional times where we would light the fire. And it just so happened that day, after that incident where they were laughing at me while I was choking trying to smoke, then I actually found a packet of cigarettes, and the fireplace was lit. It was already lit. it was already a light. So I used the actual fire to actually light a cigarette. Now, at the age of 5, fire and cigarettes are definitely not something that would be like nowadays, that just wouldn't be readily available. But back then in the late 70s, that was just something, that is just the way it was. So I ended up taking a few puffs of the cigarette, trying to imitate what I was seeing the adults do. And after a few inhalations, I wasn't coughing as much, but I was actually making noise, to which point my mum sort of came eventually into the room and she realised what I was doing and straight away took the cigarette away from me and told me that I wasn't to do that. That wasn't, that I was putting myself in danger, because I could have set myself on fire, and at the same time smoking wasn't the right thing to be doing. Now, as a child, hearing that from an adult, when they're actually smoking, it just didn't make that kind of connection in my head. So a few days later, I tried it again. And this time I was able to inhale a few kind of puffs without choking. To then, the next day, I went and found the teenage kids and I asked them, can I smoke a cigarette? At which point, they're absolutely flabbergasted that I'm able to take a couple of inhalations without choking. Now, to me, that was almost a sense of, oh, I feel that I belong, I've done something good, even though my mom was disapproving of the fact that I had sort of like taken a cigarette and tried to sort of like smoke. So I was starting to push the boundaries, starting to rebel, starting to see like I wanted to belong with the teenage kids, and my mom telling me not to smoke, I wasn't making that connection that I wasn't supposed to do that. So this is where my kind of boundaries, I'm not saying that it was just purely that incident, but that is definitely memories and situations in me where I've sort of faced that the boundaries started to sort of like get blurred to the point where there wasn't really a clear defined boundary of what was right and what was wrong in that sense. And because I was wanting to people please, and then eventually because I wanted to receive praise and recognition for the accomplishments that I was actually gaining, it sort of made me become more focused on the external validation rather than ever looking inwards. And at the age of 5, it's only understandable, but that would be the case. But another thing that had happened at that kind of age, and this is all to sort of demonstrate how the kind of people pleasing and the overgiving and the unhealthy boundaries or no boundaries started, those patterns of behaviour started to become part of my norm and part of my blueprint. That is the way that I knew how to function. So it was my coping strategies. So when I started preschool or kindergarten, I was being taught how to write, and at that point I was able to write with both hands, which is like now it's a revered skill to be able to write with both hands. You're ambidextrous, but because the way the norm was that you were to be a right hand writer rather than a left hand writer, my dad, well-intentioned, wanted me to fit in and belong, so he encouraged me to stop using my left hand and to use just my right hand. Now there was a fair bit of reward and bribing in order for me to do that, plus there was also the threat of that I wouldn't be pleasing, I would be dissatisfying my father if I didn't comply to his request for me to stop writing with my left hand. So in my desire to feel loved, feel connected, I wanted to do what my dad said. And as a result, over a prolonged period of time, probably over the next 2-3 months, I eventually stopped writing with my left hand and my right hand became my predominant writing hand. Now, the irony is, several years later, I was involved in a bike accident where I was going down a hill and my bike ended up landing, I sort of like toppled over and the bike ended up landing on my right hand. And as a result, I sprained my arm pretty severely, so I wasn't able to write. And when I was at school, I thought, oh, this is brilliant. I can actually get away from doing any homework because I can't use my right hand. But then my dad remembered that I was able to write with my left previously. So he was like, no, Tanya, this is the one time that it's okay for you to actually use your left hand to take notes. So it just goes to show that sometimes people pleasing can actually create behaviours and patterns that are not necessarily going to serve you longer term. But at the time, it is the necessary evil. It's what you need to do in order for you to feel connected, feel love, and feel safe in your environment. So I just wanted to sort of relay a few of those stories that back then, that was the norm. That is what happened. If this was to happen today, there would probably be we're more self-aware, got more kind of tools, techniques, and we've got a bigger knowledge and awareness of how to parent and how to nurture children that have got different learning patterns and different abilities, rather than trying to make them all just merge into one and just become a carbon copy of each other. We want to nurture uniqueness. We want to make children be seen and heard and be courageous and able to express themselves. But back in the 70s, people were just doing the best that they could. They didn't have the tools and the awareness to be able to know that long term, this shielding a child from being who they are and expressing who they are was going to have a detrimental impact on them. And because in my case, I was a high achieving, a high functioning, codependent, I was wanting to people please, overgive, and do what other adults were asking me to do without necessarily questioning. Well, having said that, the rebellious side on me over the years did question a fair bit, but at that time I was blindly following the instructions from the adults, whether it was teenage kids that were older than me. And in Greece there is this cultural norm where it's you always respect the views and opinions of an older person. So even if someone was 6 years old, with me being 5, I was to listen to what the 6-year-old had to say as opposed to dismiss them. So as a result, it was always that external looking for people to sort of validate and see you and hear you and recognize you, praise you and celebrate you. And for me, that happened over my life by people pleasing, by meeting other people's expectations, by going above and beyond, by being the best role model that I could be for my younger sister and for other cousins that were roughly about my kind of age group and slightly younger. So as a result, it was always sort of like doing more and being seen to do more, which it can have its upsides because it can make you a high achiever and keep pushing and becoming resourceful and finding abilities and capabilities within yourselves and creating skills and traits that can actually prove very valuable in the workplace in years to come and through my studying. However, as a human being trying to live a fulfilling, enjoyable life, where you are content with life rather than always striving for the next thing, always suppressing how you may be feeling and not sort of acknowledging every aspect of the human experience, it can create issues further down in life. And for me, it's been a lot of lessons that it's taken several iterations of them. They've had to resurface multiple times through my adult life before I was able to sort of like make the connection between all the dots. But they all stemmed back from my childhood because I create this inner belief that in order for me to feel loved, in order for me to feel safe, in order for me to feel that I was connected and I belonged, I had to people please. I had to overgive. I had to be the version that people expected me to be rather than me authentically being myself. So that is the one lesson that I've sort of started to unravel in the past 18 months. And the more that I have, the more I'm feeling stronger within myself and in my truth. And this is one of the reasons why I have created this YouTube channel, because I know that years ago, we didn't talk about this stuff, and what was norm in the late 70s back in Greece would not be the norm in Greece today. So things have evolved in the way that we sort of like interact with each other as human beings, the way we parent is totally different to the way that it was done previously. But it also explains why as an adult we've got patterns of behaviour that we go back to, and this is where our subconscious makes that link of, oh, I am recognised and celebrated and rewarded for doing what other people expect me to do. So it creates that kind of neural pathway where you want to feel that pleasure, you want to be recognised and celebrated, so therefore you're going to do what people are asking you to do. But what that does to you internally by constantly doing that and constantly striving to do more, be more, give more, is that it really exhausts you and it depletes you. And that's probably why a lot of people, when they start reaching into their 40s, it's called midlife crisis, which is you sit back and you think, oh my God, I feel exhausted. And whether it is the constant chronic stress of work, obligations, family commitments, expectations that we set upon ourselves, or it's just this baggage that we've been covering or we've been carrying for years, and therefore it's a case of, in order for us to let go and feel free and really be our true selves, it's about making those connections with our past and what we're currently doing and seeing, is being a people pleaser and an overgiver the right thing for me right now? And the answer is no. And that's why I have stopped people pleasing and overgiving. It doesn't mean that I'm not a kind, compassionate, generous person, because I always, that is my core kind of values. But the way that I'm demonstrating that is coming across differently, and it's also creating healthier boundaries, which, as I've mentioned, I didn't really have previously. And that way I'm safeguarding my well-being, but at the same time enabling other people to step up and problem solve their own problems, be resourceful in their own way. Yes, maybe listen to some advice if they ask for it with permission, but it's about letting people figure things out for themselves, just like I've figured out things for myself. Now, I've had the aid and guidance of therapists and coaches and counsellors along the way, so it's not been a path that I have just gone on my own. And this is where you can maybe fast track things by getting the right support at the right time. But I come back to the kind of saying that I've been using throughout this channel: when the student is ready, the right teacher appears. And whether that is a book, a podcast, a conversation with a passerby, or someone that you're actually paying to employ for their professional services, either through coaching or therapy or counselling or whatever other modality of healing that you may be seeking, it's about finding the right thing for you at the right time. So I know I've gone a wee bit into more kind of lecture mode here at the end, but this is me processing what had happened and giving a bit of context, especially if some of you that may have been watching up until now, well done for you if you've stuck to 23 minutes, that have not lived in the 70s, that have not had that life experience, and this is totally alien to you, me recounting this information. So I don't want it to be perceived as, oh, that was wrong. No, that is just the way it was, but there could be better ways to sort of like tackle and deal with these situations, and things have improved since then. Okay, I think I'm going to bring it to a close here. Thank you for sticking around. I really do appreciate it. I hope there was kind of some light relief in there and it wasn't alarm bells being thrown up, because that certainly wasn't my intention. But it gives a bit of context as to why I've needed to go on this kind of self-development, kind of internal, taking care and loving myself and being aware of my feelings and acknowledging them, and then sort of either reframing them or changing them and letting them go. So until the next one, go out and seize the day. Have the most amazing day. And remember, there's always choices in life, so choose wisely. Until the next one, bye.